Welcome back to Right Hand Drive, guys. I'm Bobby. This is Aaron,
KO.
and we are live from the S14. Why? Why are we live from the S14 today?
Why not?
Really, yeah, why not? It's sitting in the garage. It's got nice Recaros, kind of more comfortable than our normal seats, to be honest.
Yeah.
For me, at least.
You're not lying.
I'm not, like, tipping back and falling forward. But, no, for real, we decided we really haven't shown much love to the Silvia. We have done a lot on the GTRs, the Skylines, whatever else. But the Silvia is like the little brother that doesn't get the love from us so far, at least.
Yeah. No, we haven't given it any love, and we've done a lot on the Skylines. So
Yeah,
why
ton.
not touch on the Silvia? Because it is just as popular as the Skyline, I would think, in its own,
Yeah,
in
for
its
sure.
own realm. So, yeah, why not?
Yeah, so we kind of figured, hey, let's go through a little bit of the history of the Silvia and then kind of just go through our experiences, our feelings about it, and just kind of chop it up about the S chassis.
Yeah, let's
Sweet.
do it.
So you wanna start out? I know you are a little more versed with the Silvia than I am, but I'll do my best to keep up.
Yeah, it's all good. So, yeah, starting out, everyone knows the S13, the S14, S15. Those are like the three ones that are sought after.
Mm-hmm.
We did have a S12, which was a 200SX in the States, or a Silvia overseas. So we did have that as well, but those are kind of weird. They didn't come with a cool engine or nothing like that.
Standard like 80s car.
Right, but before that one was an S110 Silvia.
S110.
And the only reason I'm bringing this one up is because there was actually a homologation special for rally that Nissan made, and it was the Nissan 240 RS.
240 RS.
Yeah, and this was the only homologation special that came out of a Silvia between all the generations. So
Wow.
it's special in that, right? But, looking at it on paper, and it's not really that impressive. It doesn't have an SR20 in it, I guess was what I'm saying.
Right.
So-
It was it was an 80s car, right?
Yeah, 100%. It was definitely from the 80s. Yeah, I mean, it was decent. It was made from 83 to 85. Only 200 road-going examples were built. So, very special car. But it definitely has that early 80s,
Feel to it.
that feel, that look. It's just not as refined as, the later S13
Right.
and
Of
beyond.
course. That was the stepping stone to get to that point.
Right.
So did you know that the Silvia is derived from the name of the Roman goddess of the hunt and chastity?
Wow. Dude.
So
they really went deep
it was
on this.
meant to slay.
Dude, I guess
it was
so.
meant to slay. So you get the S110, and then what's next?
After that was the S12, which, I mean, they can be cool. I know Japan got some really cool models, including an RSX turbo model, which,
Ooh, RSX
has...
Turbo.
Yeah, it has like a two-tone, some cool graphics on the side.
K-Series.
Wait a minute. But yeah, like I said, those don't have quite the following that the later models have. So, yeah, moving on to the S13.
Which started in 88, right?
88 in Japan, 89 in the States. So these are the ones that, I don't know, I guess that are sought after for drifting and any type of motorsport, because they're a super light front engine rear wheel drive car that has a very good suspension setup from the factory. Just a very well balanced car that makes it fun to drive and, pretty easy. The S13 is probably one of my favorites. Personally, I had an S13 for my first car, and, being into drifting and everything, I loved it. So
those come with an SR20, right?
Well, in the beginning, they came with a CA18 DET, which is a 1.8 liter turbo 4-cylinder. A lot of people say that's like a baby RB because they have some of the same technology, and like the way the valve covers bolt on and everything is kind of similar to the RB, but it's in its own right. It's all right.
Yeah, I've heard of that one before.
Yeah, it's okay at best. But then later models came with the SR20 DET that, the red top. The red top.
Oh, that's where the red top comes from.
That's where the red top comes from, is from the S13 SR20.
And those come with a 5-speed or?
Yep. They come with a 5-speed manual or a 4-speed automatic. So in the S13s and the 14s as well, you just got the 5-speed. But, no hate there. It's a good transmission.
So that was until like 93.
Yep.
Right? And so so all S chassis were rear wheel drive, right?
Yeah, correct. They were all rear wheel drive only. Never got an all wheel drive one. I've seen some people do some crazy stuff with like RB26 swapping and doing the whole, but that's a whole different thing. No, they were just rear wheel drive, had an independent rear suspension, like very good setup for motorsports, I guess you could say. So it's a very great car, and that's what made them so popular, on the mountains, on the toge, going drifting. 100% that was one of the cars starting out, like, that was sought after for that.
Especially that people could afford at that time because they weren't really pulling a premium.
Yeah, no, I mean, you could, whenever the prices hit, like, rock bottom, you could get a Silvia for pretty cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine how many of these cars were just smashed into walls at Ebisu, like, over the years. How many, pristine S13s were just
completely destroyed
because they were the bottom of the barrel. They were the cheap car. Right. They were the thrash cars.
And as
what
the
I mean?
newer models are coming out, they became less in demand. I mean, it makes sense. So,
right.
I mean, after that, so S13, right, like we said, till 93, and then they immediately dropped the S14.
Yep.
In Japan in October of 93.
Yeah.
And in 94, for the international models.
Yeah, so, again, Japan got it a year earlier than we did in the States, which is understandable. Also, I'd like to add, with the S13s and the S14s, they had two trim levels, being a Qs or a Ks. The Qs, as like, the Queen, was usually NA, didn't have maybe all the options, but was a very well put together car. The K, or the Ks, was the King. That was the top level. That was the turbo, the power everything. Like, that was the premium model, and the model that, was more sought after, I guess you could say, just because it had the full array of options and had the turbo motor, obviously.
Of course, yeah. And so from the factory, people weren't buying these to take them out and make them a drift missile. They were actually buying them to be, in sometimes even like a family car. Granted, I know it's a coupe, but like, obviously in the 90s, it wasn't all about the biggest vehicle you could get. And so some people were actually using these as just a family car, like their run-of-the-mill car type thing.
Right.
And had no clue the demand that would come later on.
No clue the demand. And, you can kind of see it. Like, when you're in the car, like, it's not like this raw machine, It's got, these creature comforts. It's got cool fabric on the door panels and seats. Like, it's a very, very nice car, for the factory.
Yeah,
like,
for the 90s.
When these things rolled off the assembly line, like, they were, a pretty plush car, I would imagine. And I remember reading this article back in the day talking about the S14 specifically, that they designed S14s to be geared more towards women.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I mean, just the way the shapes of things are and just the way they're laid out.
More attractive to the female audience.
Yeah, that's what they say. So
Do you hear that, ladies? The S14's for you.
exactly. So go ahead and
Pick
get
one
one.
up.
Why not?
Yeah.
Right?
So, and so the 14 went, like we said, until 98 in Japan
Yeah.
and until 2000 internationally. And so that's where the S chassis stops internationally, right?
With the S14.
Yeah.
Well, they did have a few Euro models and Australian models of the S15,
Oh, okay.
but
So of course everyone else gets the S15 and we're stuck with
exactly. I mean,
just the 14.
in the States, that is where it stopped for us in '98 with the kooky facelift version. And yeah, I feel like these Japanese manufacturers do a good job of like, or at least in the '90s, they did a good job of doing like these facelift models.
Yeah.
So, when the S14 came out, it had these more rounder headlights. I mean, everyone knows the Zinky. Like,
Yeah, it's
they had that out for a couple years, and then they do a facelift where, they change the headlights, change the front end a little bit, do a little bit different taillights, and do a little bit different interior, and it's pretty much like a brand new model.
right.
You
It's
know?
like like the cheater.
Right. It like kind of, I don't know, I guess you could say gets everyone reinterested in it again without
Yeah.
having to design a whole new car. And yeah, I
That's
feel
a great idea, I think. And me personally, I like uh the Kuki way more than the Zenki. Like
yeah,
the Zenki to me just looks like way more basic and less like kind of aggressive.
right.
And the Kuki, so this car that we're sitting in is a 94.
Hmm.
So it was originally a Zenki. The guy who had it before me clearly felt the same way as I did
Yeah.
because he changed out the Zenki to a Kuki.
Right.
So this car has all the Kuki parts. Probably the only reason why I bought it, to be honest,
Yeah.
because I wouldn't have bought a Zenki. So
Right.
there are people who really, really like the Zenki. Like who are
I like the
this
Zinky.
guy. But yeah, I mean, and that's just interesting how that is, that
Right.
you just have some people that can't stand the Zenki and some people that would automatically pass on the Kuki.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people have the argument, well, for the Zinky, that the Zinky front end matches the rest of the body so much better because the way the body is shaped is kind of bubbly and round, and that kind of matches the shape of the headlights with it being
Yeah.
bubbly and round. But
I can see that.
yeah, I mean, I can totally get that the
There-
Kuki. The Kuki's definitely cool.
Yeah, I
And-
mean, it really is.
Also, what's really cool is like all this stuff just bolts on. Like you don't have to do any kind of crazy modifications to do a facelift. You just get some fenders, bumper, pretty much a whole front end, and you're good to go.
Just get them painted and bolt them on. Yeah. I mean, that was smart, not just for the consumer, but for manufacturing and maintenance. Having interchangeable parts, period, is always like a good call.
Yeah. I mean, and also to touch on the engine of these S14s, they did have an updated SR20 DET or SR20 DE as well if you got the NA. So with that being said, it had variable valve timing. It had a bigger turbo, different intake manifold design. It was just more refined along the way to match the new model. So I thought that was pretty cool. They took a few of the pieces that were lacking in the S13 as far as the engine goes, and they made them right in the S14. Which
Unless you happen to get an American version with the KA.
yeah.
Then it's tough. It's tough on you.
We really got shafted in the States, man, because like with the S13 and S14, they both came with what everyone considers the truck motor, the KA24.
The truck motor.
The truck motor, because it was the same engine that they had in the Frontier trucks, and it was a
Dog,
2.4
yeah.
liter 4-cylinder, dude, and it was just a dog, no turbo, but they definitely made decent power. They could take a boost, but you had to do some work to get them there.
I would love to talk to somebody from Nissan who knows why that happened. Like
I know.
why we had to get this motor, why it didn't just make sense to send the SR all the way through.
Right.
Like, what was the regulations that stopped them from doing that?
Right.
It'd be really nice to know, because you'd maybe just feel a little bit better about, like, what we got over here.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, we had to give that to you because of these emissions. Let's just pretend it's that.
Yeah. Let's just say it's that, man, because like that could have changed the course of these cars completely. Like if it was more of like you could just buy it and go type thing, and you didn't have to buy the car, then buy the SR swap, then buy all the stuff to go along with the swap, and then blowing it up because you're running a stock ECU and running 91 gas. Like,
yeah, that would be tough. Yeah,
it's a whole thing. Like they could have changed the course of history.
Well,
if they would have just
at least their sales volume in the 90s, you know, for these cars.
And resale would have been probably way higher.
Would have been great, but I don't know. Does resale matter to a manufacturer too much? I mean, it obviously pumps the brand,
right?
But obviously their bottom dollar does not get affected by that,
right?
But regardless, it would have created more fandom,
right?
Of
for
the
sure.
car, you know.
And I wonder what that would have done to the Silvia market overseas. Like,
would it have pumped it up, or would it have?
I mean, just
fizzled out.
Dude, just think of all those front clips that would have been saved that people were buying, you know, in the early 2000s for the engine.
Yeah, the car.
You know what I mean?
Maybe
how many of
still
those
be
cars?
There,
yeah, they would still be around if they weren't, you know, had the front end cut off to be shipped across seas for an SR swap. You know what I mean? Because that's how a lot of people did it back in the day. They just did it whole front cut. That way you would have all the wiring, all the accessories, everything you would need to make it run.
Like, I wonder how many motors or other things got scrapped, like that didn't get caught by the exporters, that didn't get caught by an enthusiast. That
right.
Like, how many of those just like got crushed or got you know, scrapped or whatever?
There's no telling.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So the final model, like my personal favorite, I'm sure a lot of people's personal favorites. Everybody's heard these, you know, everybody's heard of this, the S15.
The S15 Silvia.
In my opinion, the most beautiful version of the car. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I've that always, since, you know, a younger kid, right? Like the S15 was the one, you know, because.
Do you remember where you first saw one?
D1 GP.
Yep.
For sure. Like, yeah, I'm like, dude, what is this car? Because it, like, the headlights remind me of a teardrop on the side, and like I had no clue what the car even was.
Right.
And I'm like 12 or something, you know, and I just call it like the car with the teardrop headlights, you know, that one to like my buddy, right? You know, and so yeah, I mean, maybe if I hadn't seen it in such an iconic like version of itself,
in its best self.
Yeah, maybe I wouldn't have been so attracted to it. But yeah, dude, I love that car. And I hate that they had it in Too Fast, Too Furious with the livery that they did.
Yeah.
Because it just, in my opinion, it just made it like the opposite, right?
Or no, it was Tokyo Drift, right?
Tokyo Drift, right?
Yeah. Mona Lisa.
Mona Lisa, yeah. Like I just personally think that livery was ugly, and especially compared to seeing it like done so well so many times.
Right,
it was like, dude, you guys.
Like, yeah, they let the wrong Craig, I'm sorry. If that was you, dude, come on.
You messed it up, man.
I don't think it was him though.
No, it wasn't. We're saying it wasn't.
Yeah, we're saying Craig
we
don't
want to feel that way about it.
Craig wouldn't do that.
So I mean, this car was directly after the S14 again.
Yep.
I mean, kind of almost an overlap, right? Like they probably. I was told that you could find in a Nissan dealership in 1999. You could find both cars in the dealership.
Yeah.
At one time.
100%.
S14 and S15.
And on top of that, S13 180, the 180SX S13, you could find also at the dealership up until 98.
At the same time.
Yeah.
So if there was a leftover
sure.
of the 180,
You could find
And
all three
yes,
generations.
that would be crazy. Imagine walking into a dealership in Japan in 1999, let's say.
Yeah.
And there's all three in white.
Yeah.
Like, that would be wild, dude.
Right, dude. The 180SX Type X, the S14 Kooky, and then the S15 Spec R.
Yeah.
And dude, next to that, over off to the side, is the R34.
Yeah,
like,
that would be crazy.
Just imagine walking into a Nissan dealership and just seeing that lineup.
Develop those
Man,
pictures because I
dude.
want to see them, dude.
Seriously, that's
I
insane.
almost tempted to ask AI to make me one of those just to see it.
Yeah.
Even though it'd be like messed up because
Right.
AI still kind of sucks. But these went until August of 2002, around the same time that the 34 was discontinued.
Right,
and
right.
it seems like there was a lot of changes, period,
Yeah.
in Nissan and sports cars alike.
Right.
There was one really cool thing about the S15, and I'm not sure that like everybody even knows about it. The Varietta.
Oh yes, dude, the Varietta.
Like seeing those in Japan was so cool. Like
Man.
we were driving by this random little dealership, and we're like, "Oh, what's that?" You're like, "Oh, dude, that's a friggin' Varietta."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Holy shit, that's an S15 with the top down."
Yes,
like, what
dude.
the fuck?
Yeah, they were sick. I mean, they were commissioned by Autech, so
that's almost like the S15's version of an Autech car.
well, S15s did have an Autech version, but Autech
Oh.
was the one behind the design and the making
Making it
Variettas.
possible. Yeah.
Yes. So,
Because I
although
think it's like is it like an electric rear that
Yeah,
it folds?
Yeah,
That's
it's
pretty legit for
from
2000, the year 2000.
yeah. From what I understand, and from what I've gathered, because I've definitely looked into these cars, because I'm like S15 drop top. Yeah, that would be cool. I could see myself in that.
Ice cream paint job.
Ice
dude?
cream paint job, dude. Why not? So the whole mechanism and everything is all electric. It's not like these weird hydraulics, and like it's almost like window motors is what I've gathered that
Oh, I see.
it works off of. So it's all electric, but I mean, as they age, like who knows?
25-year-old electric hardtop
Yeah.
or soft top. Yeah.
And I'm not sure how many they made. They were pretty rare. I want to say it was like under 1,000, but I'm not totally positive on that number. But yeah, I mean, how many spare parts can there be out there for these?
yeah. No, you.
That's the only
almost-
thing that's
yeah.
kind of scary about them is,
I
like,
mean, and I've seen in real life, I've seen like 2 of them, and then online, I've seen an additional 4 or 5.
yeah,
I mean, they're definitely out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Could be in a garage somewhere in Japan just collecting dust.
yeah, 100%, and probably low mileage because it's probably someone's Sunday driver, like
Yeah, no, you're right. So basically, beyond the Varietta, it was only Spec S and Spec R.
Right. That's what kind of took place of the Qs and Ks.
Yeah.
The Spec S would be the non-turbo. Spec R would be the turbo model. And each of those had aero models. So you could get a Spec S aero that was, had the aero front bumper, side skirts, rear wing, rear bumper, spats, all that. And then you could also get that Spec R turbo, 6-speed, all that with all the aero as well.
Yeah,
So,
that was probably a pretty cool setup. So the SR20 and the S15 had about 250 base horsepower.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't too much different from the S14. The only thing that really got a facelift on that is the turbo on the manual models only. So on the Spec R manuals, the turbo was a little bit bigger, had a little bit different design with the exhaust, and it made decent power. You can get over 300 horsepower out of a basically stock SR20, just by turning up the boost and maybe playing with the tune a little bit. But that's pretty stout.
Yeah,
for
sure.
late 90s,
For a light rear-wheel drive car.
Yeah, dude. I mean, 300 horsepower, that's plenty of fun.
And so you were mostly right. So it says this generation of Silvia was only sold in Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. So Australia and New Zealand got it, Europe didn't. and it was called a 200SX
Yeah.
in Australia, in New Zealand, which is interesting how Nissan did this quite a few times
Yeah.
with different cars. They would have their Australia and New Zealand market would get something, but no one else would. I
Yeah.
wonder what, like, because I mean, it's kind of close to Japan, right?
Right. Right.
Kind of.
Right.
I wonder just what that relationship was to provoke them to do business in New Zealand and Australia, but not go to England or, not come over to the United States.
Right.
Must have just been really strong there or something like
Must
that.
have been. I mean, I'm not sure. Like, I'd be interested to know, like, why Australia, dude? We're cool too.
Yeah, no doubt. So, yeah, I mean, so these are the 13, 14, 15 are basically, as most of you guys know, those are the models, right? Like
Yeah.
those are the ones that have created a following and almost a cult-like following, as far as there are some people who love these cars and this is all they want.
Yeah.
Just like as you said, just like there are guys that like love Skylines or love GTRs, there are guys that love Spec Rs or love
Yeah.
the Ks and so it's kind of interesting, because a lot of people will call the S chassis the the R chassis or whatever's little brother.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, is that just because of the 4-cylinder? Is that just because of the size of the car? Like
Right.
what ended up making the Silvia the little?
The lesser model, I
Yeah,
guess you could say.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, probably the budget put into it.
right? Yeah, true. The original cost of the car compared to the cost of the other cars.
Right. Right. And I feel like in that time, Nissan themselves pushed the Skyline as like the upper tier model.
Right. Well, I mean, it is 6-cylinder. It
Right.
is twin turbo,
Right.
the high models. So I guess I can see that, right?
Yeah.
Like Ultima Maxima,
Right.
how
Right.
like
Right.
there's, it's like you can kind of see them as the same car, but really there is these
There's a little
differences.
difference, yeah. And it's kind of wild, once I got into the Skyline, started taking it apart. It is pretty wild how many parts do swap over. Like, for instance, my R32 has a complete rear subframe and suspension out of an S13.
Wild.
But the front end is wildly different. It has a double wishbone, I believe is what they call it, where it's got an upper control arm and all that. Whereas the Silvias, they had a McPherson type strut, which is a lot more simple, probably cheaper to manufacture,
Right. Makes
and
sense.
it's a little bit different on how you can adjust the camber and stuff like that, but way more
Right.
simple.
Yeah, because you'll see them promote the double wishbone as the upgraded suspension.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But a lot of the guys into drifting, the R chassis will convert the front suspension to S13 or S14 as well.
So okay, we got a few minutes left here. Our last episode went real long. So shout out your top 3 S chassis that have been built that you have always admired.
Man, you're putting me on the spot. Top 3 S chassis. Well, one for sure is the blue Toyo Tires RPS 13. Well, I guess that's a 180SX. Does that count?
I don't know. You tell me. You're the S chassis guy.
Well, I'll just throw out a stock one. The two-tone S13s, the seafoam green with the gray bottom, those are iconic to me.
Seafoam green, yeah.
That
the
specific
two-tone.
two-tone with this, man, it's perfect. Any two-tone S13 period, gonna be my favorite. But yeah, beyond that one, see, there's plenty of S14s and S15s. The HKS S15 drift car, that one was a favorite. Also rocking one of my favorite sets of wheels, the Advan SA3Rs. So that one's the definite favorite. Let's see.
One more.
Let's see, an S14. The Oh, yes, the Weld Engineering S14. It was made for, I mean, I don't know if it was made for Tokyo Auto Salon, but it definitely debuted there. It had this insane SR20 that was pushed way back. It had this whole front end that like folded forward or, tilted
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
forward, and the headlights and everything were still attached, and like ton of custom work on it. Super sick car. I remember seeing it for sale on one of the forums back in the day, and it was only like $15,000 for this fully built, insane.
Wild how that stuff was.
Yeah, and nowadays that car is probably priceless, and ain't no telling where it is. So those are my three, or
I'm not gonna have three because I was never like a S chassis guy, but like for sure iconic ones I can remember is the Top Secret
Oh yeah,
S15,
yep.
but then also I could there was also like gold, and they were like a super popular company, and they kind of went out of business when drifting fell off. I cannot remember what that garage was called now, and I'm sure if we looked, we'd find it immediately and be like, oh,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was gold, and they always had gold cars, kind of like Top Secret, but it was a
Right.
little bit different gold. Um, but any of those drifting S15s,
Yeah.
like the S15, the S14, the S chassis period is for sure what helped drifting become like larger, right? Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
utilization of those chassis really propelled drifting in an affordable way.
Right. Right. 100%. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if drifting would be what it is today without these S
That's what I'm
chassis and these
saying.
turbo cars. I mean, yeah, everyone had an 8.6 before that,
Right, right.
but like you can only get so far with an NA,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, sure,
screamer. You know what I
some
mean?
people used RX-7s, but they had a bunch of problems with them, right? Super was too big body.
Yeah.
Like this S chassis was almost like the perfect concoction
Yeah.
of like different pieces that really like propelled it, because
Yeah.
you could, let's just say in Japan back in 2006, could go get like an S15 or an S14 or shoot your first S13
Yeah.
for really cheap money.
Yeah.
Crank up the boost, do your little mods, and then get out on the track.
For sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, drifting wouldn't be what it is today without these affordable platforms to start out with. Because, I
Yeah,
mean, if you're priced out of the platform from the rip, then it's impossible to get into.
that's kind of the issue that they're running into today.
Right, right. Which is why probably you're seeing a lot more 90s Camaros and Mustangs in America. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that is
It's
tough.
whatever. But
Um,
yeah, I think if it weren't for the S chassis, the entry level drift car would never
have
have
even
came
been,
about.
yeah. And so even though now the S chassis is way more expensive,
Oh yeah, it is. It's insane.
it still started that off and really gave some guys that now are a staple in the community their start.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, this episode's just been all about the Silvia, why we love the Silvia, why the Silvia got popular. If we missed anything, hit us in the comments, hit us in the DMs, let us know, because it's all about the education. We're figuring it out too. So yeah, make sure you hit us up on IG at RHDGUIS. He's at Blunt Garage. If you want to check out the merch, check out the merch on rhdguis.com. And for episode 55, I'm Bobby. This is Aaron.
See ya.
Peace.